Okay, so through the wonder of modern technology, Alan Hodgkinson, a pillar of the gemological community and recipient of the very first AGA Bonanno Award, that was back in 2000. He's joining us today from Scotland. Everybody say hi to Charlotte and Alan. Hi, Charlotte. So Cigdem and Stuart are going to interview Alan and ask him some wonderful questions so we can hear his terrific answers. And then we're going to open up the floor to all of you who want to ask questions of Alan. And here's Cigdem and Stuart.
Thank you. I don't think Alan can see me, but I'd like to say a few words before we start. He's probably one of the most amazing human beings that I met, let alone being the most amazing gemologist. So I am today standing here and having the opportunity to talk to him and ask some questions. I am thrilled, I'm honored, and I'm humbled. And with that, we will ask questions to Alan about his gemological journey. This is not a gemological presentation. And I would like to say that the first half hour of this conversation will be the questions that coming from me and Stuart to him. However, in the second half hour, I'd like to encourage especially the new members or the members that you've never met and who've never met and talked to Alan before, ask questions. Some of us had that privilege for years when Alan was coming here or we're going to Scotland and so on. We had that pleasure. I can guarantee you that he is the most approachable person if you're feeling shy. So don't do that. Please come across after we have finished our questions and ask questions. Do not miss this opportunity. The second opportunity we have here is that his books were sold immediately after the first print. So his wonderful daughter, Valerie Hodgkinson, made it happen again, and we have new copies that were reprinted, and we are actually making it available to you all right at the back. And you can go and see Sam McLaughlin from Scottish Gemological Association right at the back with the books. If you think that you don't want the special here and you want to order it, Alan made a very generous offer that you can order it online, but the very first 10 orders will come with his signature. So it's entirely up to you what choice you want to make, but I have a feeling that they're going to sold out today anyway, so be aware of that. With that, I'd like to say hi to Alan. Alan, you can't see me, but can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Would you like to say anything before we start, or shall we start with our questions?
On with the questions, please.
Okay, then I will I will pass it on to Stuart for you.
Good evening, Alan. My first question was, during your career, what did you find more enjoyable, the gemology or teaching gemology?
It's a lovely question, Stuart. And personally, it's the teaching of gemology. What a privilege. In 1961, I acquired my FGA with distinction and realized pretty soon that the public was so curious about gemology. Talking about it is one thing, but the real key to arousing that interest and developing it is to demonstrate. A good example is a piece of calcite, a calcite crystal. And when we would have visitors, I would get preferably a youngster, but even the adults, to draw a line on a piece of paper. Then place a piece of calcite over the top. And of course, the line doubled. Then to bring out a piece of Polaroid and have the person rotate the Polaroid over the doubled line and see the line jump from one to the other in the same way as you see when you rotate the polarizer in your refractometer, you see the shadow jump up and down. And to me, this is very positive and helps us to get going with our refractometers.
I appreciate that, Alan. I always assume that, and I just am reminded that the very first time I met you was not in Scotland, but in Winnetka, Illinois, when you were visiting for a alumni meeting. But I'm going to pass the microphone now to Cigdem, and she's going to ask a question.
Alan, we know your wonderful teaching, and also I have to emphasize that your inventions in gemology and make it available and accessible to everybody was my one of the major admirations to your work. And I do believe that you are an inventor at heart. What was the first thing you did differently or discovering differently than the ordinary, or has it all started with gemology? Did your inventor side came up with gemology, or you already had that?
Gemology gives you such a privileged perspective on life. Think of a cup of tea on the table. The light comes through the window, reflects off the top of the tea, and reflects on the ceiling. The gemologist doesn't just notice that. The gemologist knows that the angle of incidence of light is the same as the angle of reflection. So you can predict where the light will appear on the ceiling. This happens with a block of flats. As the sun sets, all the windows in the block of flats light up simultaneously. If one of the windows doesn't light up, it's not parallel with all the other windows. Things like that, the gemologist sees and understands from a gemological perspective. Fujivelvia became a friend of mine, thanks to my daughter Valerie, photographer. She recommended Fujivelvia film for photographing gems. And I took a photo of a natural and synthetic emerald. When I saw the resultant photograph, I was struck by the fact these matching emeralds didn't match on the photograph. And it occurred to me that there must be a filter that could be developed that would do the same job. And sure enough, I found that, in fact, you could take a piece of Fujivelvia film, or equivalent, a filter, and you could actually see the difference between the two, which I called the synthetic emerald filter. Your accidental discoveries, sometimes and at other times more deliberate approach, as with developing visual optics. But there's also the fact of the polarized path in the sky. In the sky, we have a heavenly dichroscope because there is a path of polarized light. This is well known and it's written up in one of the books. But I was immediately struck by the fact, well, if there's a dichroscope in the sky, let's make a polariscope. And I took a piece of Polaroid, crossed it with the sky, produced then a polariscope situation. I couldn't wait to put a quartz sphere between the two, and hey presto, there was the unique quartz uniaxial figure with its central color and its isochrome rings. That I recorded on film, and I was proud to be the first to do that.
All right, Alan, this next one is a bit of a mouthful, so I'll try to go pretty clearly with it. But my question pertains to gemology as it's changing. So For thousands of years, humans have been attracted by the beauty of gemstones. But today, gemologists are using more advanced and at times too complicated analyses to look at gems. Does this pose a risk to the allure of gemstones?
No, I don't think it does for a moment. 2,000 years ago, Pliny shared his knowledge of gemstones, and it didn't do any harm at all. And here we are 2,000 years on, and we've got Richard Drucker with his Gem Guide sharing the values of gemstones. It can only do good, and it does good for the trade, for the jewelers, and for the valuers. Now, the knowledge is one thing, but I would recommend that you all pursue education. You're doing that right now, all of you sitting here with the AGA conference. You're increasing your knowledge, and that knowledge really does lend power to your elbow gemologically. So keep it up.
Thank you, Alan. And my last question. You've done a lot for gemology. You have discovered instruments and you have taught us many things. What would you like to see in the future of gemology?
Well, you know, the facets of a gemstone provide a whole exposition of light, how it works in science under the laws of optics. I would love gemology to be extended into gemstones, because with a faceted gemstone, you can demonstrate all the optical properties, the reflection, the refraction, the dispersion, and the BD ratio. There's something now, the birefringence dispersion ratio, which Dr. Hanneman introduced to me some years ago. When you divide the birefringence by the dispersion, the factor, that ratio, is something you can see when you place a faceted gem to your eye and look towards any light source. And don't tell me you haven't got a light source. The light in this room reflecting off a piece of perspex provides a light source. The light reflecting off a spoon handle provides a light source. So gemology is extended to education, to open wide the opportunities for all. And above all, please remember, share your knowledge with others.
Now, I'd like to invite questions from the audience. Who would like to ask a question to Alan?
Okay.
Sure. So my question is, what is a question that you still have unanswered in gemology? Is there a tool you would like to see invented? Or, there's a lot of young gemologists coming up that still have a lot of experimenting to do.
Well, the mysteries of gemstones have always intrigued human beings, males and females, in equal part. And I would say that at the moment we're confronted by a mystery, we want to find an answer. And the best gemologist is the one who wants to find the answer.
So I see a ton of books behind you. My question is, what books would you recommend, like top 3, top 5, or what types of books would you recommend to any gemologist who's just starting out?
Right. The big book of all, of course, is Webster's Gems. It's sort of 800 pages of information, and I certainly would recommend you have that sitting on your bookshelf. But there's a wonderful book on diamonds now out of print by Eric Bruton. That's a wonderful book. When you read the early part of that, the history of diamonds and diamond mines, it really is it's an extraordinary book built on the extraordinary knowledge of gemstones.
There must be another one.
I'm sorry, I'm just remembering we could not do today without the wonderful book on photography by John Covula, all those wonderful inclusion photos. They're an absolute treasure to look at and learn from.
Alan, it's never appropriate for me to ever try to suggest anything to you, but there's another book, Gem Testing Techniques, that probably would be worth a mention.
Oh, yes. If all else fails, get a copy of... If all else fails, get a copy of Gem Testing Techniques.
The question is, what got you get into gemology? What was your first interest in gemology?
What was my first interest?
And then how did you get into gemology?
Right. Well, that question goes back to what we call in this country national service. It's when you're called up to do 2 years with a uniform on. And I was called up to Aberdeen in Scotland. And there I met the Henderson family. They had the jeweller's shop in Aberdeen. And at the end of my national service, David Henderson said, would I like to come and work in his jeweller's shop? I'd never been in a jeweller's shop. What a confession. But I said yes. And he said, of course, to work with me, you will have to become a gemologist. And that opened the gates for me for a wonderful career, wonderful life, which I've enjoyed from day one.
Thank you.
We have a question coming up, Alan, but in the meantime, we have another audience member that would like to know if you prefer fishing with dry flies or wet flies.
You prefer fishing with dry flies or wet flies?
Oh, no, I'm not a very good fisherman, I'm afraid. I'd rather fish for gemstones.
Good evening over there, but from all of us here as gemologists, what would you say to a budding young gemologist for his future or her future? What advice would you give them? What encouragement would you give them?
Advice that I would give you to any one of you is that gemology, you can learn more if you're sharing. And if you can partner up with someone who lives near you and have arranged some evenings together and study gemstones, take along jewelry, gems, and share them with others, you'll find you get a group of interested people, and it's amazing what can be learned from that. And after all, it can be, if you have a candle, light the candle, put the lights out, and then do some visual optics with the candle. And that's aided if you've got a bottle of wine on the table.
The question is, Alan, what is your next book that you will or you won't write?
I think I've got to draw a line under it now at 85. And there's also the fact that to do that extraordinary book, Gem Testing Techniques, it took me 40 years to collect the material. And then I have to say how grateful I am to my daughter, Valerie. She had to deal with all the amendments, hundreds and hundreds of amendments. I never ceased to keep correcting the text. And in the end, I knew I was on thin ice. I was dancing on thin ice. So I came to an end of the amendments and the book was printed. And apparently it's been very successful.
He's not allowed to do another book. He's been banned for writing any more books. But he did used to say that a book he would have liked to have done, maybe someone else would do, would be a book concentrating on Scottish gemology and the gemstones of Scotland.
We got the message.
Yes, we have quite a range of gemstones in Scotland, including sapphires, no rubies, but sapphires, garnets, all the quartz family, transparent, and the agates, wonderful agates on the East Coast particularly. And going back 2,000 years, Pliny, his favourite gems were those that came from the East Coast of Scotland, because there were such wonderful patterns in the agates. So there's something as maybe a surprise to you. And then, of course, a learning opportunity coming up, the Scottish Conference. We built up quite a reputation until COVID came along and interfered, but our Scottish conferences were having a great success. People were enjoying coming over from different parts of the world, and you even learn how to do some Scottish country dancing.
Very much so.
Thank you, Alan. Terry Brosmer is asking, what is your favorite gemstone in your collection? And also, what was your very first gemstone?
My favorite gemstone has to be answered in the plural. I love all gemstones. They're all fascinating. Whatever the stone, you can probe inside it, especially if it's transparent. You can look inside with the microscope. You can explore it with the dichroscope, the polariscope, and the microscope, particularly looking at the inclusions that John Coivula has revealed to us. So my advice is, don't just pass a stone from one hand to the other and put it on the shelf. Have a look, make time and have a look at it more closely with your gem testing equipment.
What was the first specimen that you had?
The first specimen I had, what a questions. Oh, goodness me. Well, the jewellers in Aberdeen that I worked for, there was an insurance claim, and there was a lovely sapphire, a square Burmese sapphire, and it got damaged, and the insurance settled it, and the stone was taken out, and I acquired the stone. It's a lovely start to my collection of gems.
Alan, it's Stuart here. Your response just triggered a question of my own. Is there such a thing as a semi-precious gemstone?
Is there such a thing as a semi-precious?
No, there's no such thing as a precious gemstone. Thank you for that, Stuart. There are some gems more valuable than others. None of them is semi-precious. They're all precious in the eye of the beholder.
Thank you.
In the spirit of toast, what is the RI of Scotch?
What is the RI of
I would say 1.33, and that's the equivalent, that's the RI of water, and really whiskey is distilled water, so I'm pretty sure it would show 1.33.
that means pediatric?
Have you ever been asked to make a movie or a documentary about gemology?
Yes, there is a video called Visual Optics, and I don't think it's available now, but it was my first attempt to share visual optics on a wider front. And in fact, the first year I came to Tucson with the video, we had 1,000 of them. I brought them over to find that your system didn't cope with the European system. So I was told to throw them all in the bin.
some of us make presentations to youths, elementary schools, middle school type ages for their science. And when I go, I use the calcite to show them about double refraction. I take something that shows dispersion to the rainbow colors. And the rest of it is just giving them little sample gemstones, which they get excited about. For youngsters, can you recommend anything else that would help instill more interest in gemology besides dispersion and the double refraction and calcite?
Congratulations on sharing your gemology, especially with children. They do take to it so immediately, and it's so colorful to do that. If you think of the Swarovski pastes, those imitation gemstones, they've got a very high dispersion. I think it's 0.028. And by asking them to put that to their eye and look at any light source, they can actually perceive the refraction and the dispersion. And if there was a double refractive stone like a tourmaline or a zircon, they could even see the BD ratio, dividing the birefringence by dispersion. It's a very simple concept, and a good example of it is tourmaline. If you divide the birefringence of tourmaline, 0.02, by the dispersion, 0.02, the answer is 1. And so at maximum separation, your BD ratio images will look like that. A zircon, it looked like that. And with a zoisite, it looked like that. It's very simple to do, and it's amazing how quickly children would cotton on to that.
What car, all the cars that you have owned before, what car would you like back? It's automobile.
Cars, which would you like back, right from going way back?
Maybe you
in
can
time?
tell us a bit
That's a
more
good
about that.
question. That's a good question. When Charlotte and I became married, I bought for £140 a Ford Popular, one of the very old sit-up and beg Ford Populars. And we went a honeymoon in it, and it took us all over Scotland. If you can imagine it, it only had one windscreen wiper, and that was operated manually. It was raining, and we could see the floor at the side of the accelerator. So when I drove into Aberdeen, 20 miles, and frosty weather, halfway in, I took my right foot off the accelerator because it was frozen and put my left foot on the accelerator. Otherwise, we wouldn't have got into Aberdeen.
Would you take that car back?
Yes, if I don't imagine it's still on the go. Yes, I would.
Hi, Alan. This
Hello.
is a large audience of people that probably have numerous filters that have your name on them. This is a big audience for you for exactly what you've done over the years. If you had the time and energy and the will, do you have any additional filters that you'd like to provide the industry? Do you have ideas for other filters that might be of use to us? Maybe a filter even for finding lab diamonds from natural ones?
It's a great privilege to share gemology with others, especially lay people. That I find nearly always they're so curious and so inquisitive, and to be able to provide answers to simple questions, to talk about Cullinan diamond. Just a little snippet here. I gave a lecture tour to all the cities in South Africa in 1975, and as a sort of a little reward, De Beers allowed Charlotte and I and the children to go to their private game reserve. We had a wonderful, wonderful experience. One of the experiences was they tied up a corpse of a deer and we were sitting on logs on the ground, and in came the lions to eat the carcass. One of the lions came right up to the tent where we were, and the light showed up its yellow diamond eyes, yellow eyes. When I got home, I made up a pendant for the two of us, and I used canary diamonds to illustrate the yellow diamond eyes, yellow eyes. And I have to tell you, the definition of a canary diamond, it has no spectrum. Even though it's yellow, it has no spectrum to a spectroscope. And the yellow fluoresces yellow under long wave, and it fluoresces orange yellow under short wave. But when you switch off the light source, it phosphoresces. It's lovely to see. Oh, can I just slip in? When we were guests of honor at the Premier Diamond Mine, and that's where Cullinan was found, of course, by a Scotsman. And after lunch, we were taken through, and they opened up the archives, and they showed us the entry, 25th of January, 1905, 1 diamond, 3,106.88 carat, fine material, value £48 per carat. Doesn't seem much until you multiply it by 3,106. And the other thing is, of course, that was found on January the 25th. Most of the staff at the mine were Scots, and that night they held a Burns supper, and that diamond, Cullinan, was passed round man to man, woman to man, and they all got to handle it. And I tell you, it was more at risk that night than when Asher cut it 6 years later.
I listened to this story before, and I love that. Can you tell us about your very first gemology teaching classes that you were doing in the evenings?
Yes. Glasgow University asked me to do a series of lectures, and it was out at a little place called Rue near Helensburgh, and I wasn't really prepared for it. I had to use paper and charcoal to try and do the diagrams. I didn't have photographs or modern aids, but we managed to get through it all right. And on the 9th night of the 10, the janitor had been jingling his keys every night just before I was due to finish. And the people of the class got fed up with this. So they said, Alan, next week is the last week. Would it be possible we'll take you for dinner and we can have a session in the hotel? And I said, that's a wonderful idea. I said, and what we'll do, we'll split you up into the gentlemen and the ladies, and we'll have a quiz competition. And it was a super evening and a super meal. Oh, and by the way, many of that class became customers, very good customers. So as you can imagine, teaching gemology to classes of lay people, they're there for you as customers if you can excite them about gemstones and gemology.
Who won? The ladies or the gentlemen?
Who won? The ladies or the gentlemen? Trying to be the ladies, I think.
To be polite, I will say I can't remember. If I may just sum up to say, we should all share our knowledge of gemstones. It'll never do you any harm, especially if you're in the trade. Remember the importance of allowing gemology to reach a wider spectrum of the public. They are fascinated by gemology, and regardless of economic means, people are just so spellbound when you tell them about gemstones. We're so lucky, so privileged to work with gemstones and diamonds as our career. Go to it, all of you.
All right, Alan. Well, we're coming close to the end of our time for this, and I know it's late in the evening there. But before we let you go, I just wanted to say that I'm going to bend the rules a little bit here today, because although it's midday here, I'm only physically here. Our conversation has reminded me of all the times that we've stayed up in the evenings after the Scottish conference in the dark and found just a little bit of light to hold a stone up and practice visual optics with you, always taking the time generously to teach us. I just wanted to say, until we are together face to face again in Scotland this spring, I just toast you and your lovely bride and thank Valerie with great appreciation. And I look forward to seeing you very soon. Thank you for doing this evening. Delwini, I believe, is the choice. There we go.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you. Thank you, Cigdem, and thank you all.